What if the very thing that binds you to others is the same force that tears you apart? Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a silent, blackened lake at midnight. The surface is still, glass-like, until without warning a ripple shatters it, racing outward. You didn't throw a stone, you didn't move. But somehow you are the ripple. Somehow, someone else's pain, someone else's sorrow has entered you like an unseen hand, stirring waters you thought were your own. They call it empathy, the beautiful burden, the soul's invisible stitching to the world. We've been taught that to feel deeply for others is the highest moral good. That empathy is a beacon in the dark, a way to rescue each other from despair. But what if that beacon also blinds you? What if it quietly ensnares you, distorting your choices, draining your strength, making you a ghost wandering in other people's storms? Pause. Think back to the last time you felt devastated by a story that had nothing to do with your life. The tragedy of a stranger, the outrage of a distant injustice, the despair of a friend. You carried it, didn't you? Wore it like a second skin. Maybe you still do. For centuries, philosophers and poets alike exalted empathy as the bridge between isolated islands of human existence. Schopenhauer argued that compassion is the basis of all morality. Rousseau called empathy the cornerstone of natural human goodness. And yet buried within these glowing endorsements is a silence about the ways empathy can fracture the mind, collapse boundaries, and make you bleed for battles that were never yours to fight. Modern psychology now peers into this silence. Neuroscientists have mapped the mirror neurons in your brain, those uncanny circuits that light up when you see someone else in pain, almost as if you yourself are being wounded. The mind, it turns out, cannot always tell the difference between your suffering and theirs. There is no firewall, no warning label, no emergency exit. In an era addicted to outrage, in a world saturated with tragedy on every screen, how much of what you feel is truly your own? Where do you end, and where does the rest of the world's anguish begin? There's a cost to caring too much, a dark undercurrent rarely spoken aloud. Not because it isn't real, but because acknowledging it would threaten the very ideals we cling to. Altruism, solidarity, human decency. To admit empathy has a shadow would be to admit that even our noblest instincts carry the seeds of our undoing. But what if looking at that shadow didn't diminish empathy but purified it? What if true compassion means not drowning in others' suffering, but learning how to walk beside it without losing yourself? This isn't a call to shut down your heart. It's an invitation to open your eyes, to recognize that the soul's deepest connections must be tended with wisdom, not just emotion. Empathy is a fire. Uncontrolled, it devours. Honed, it illuminates. And so the journey begins. Into the hidden alleys of the human mind, where love and anguish intertwine, where caring becomes a battlefield, and where feeling too much can cost you more than you realize. Let us step into the places most people are too afraid to look, the dark side of empathy you never knew was there, but have always, somewhere deep inside, suspected was real. Empathy at first glance appears to be the purest form of connection, a luminous thread spun between hearts. But peer closer, and you will find frayed edges, knots, tangles hidden in the weave. Beneath its light, empathy casts a long, often invisible shadow. To understand it, you must be willing to descend. Carl Jung spoke often of the shadow, the unconscious parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. It is not evil in itself, he warned, but grows monstrous when left unseen. What if empathy, that most celebrated virtue, also had its own shadow self? A darkness not born of malice, but of blindness. You can see it in the silent exhaustion of the nurse who, after years of absorbing patients' despair, becomes numb. In the activist so consumed by outrage at injustice that they cannot experience joy without guilt. In the friend who carries the sorrows of others so deeply that their own soul begins to erode. Empathy, unexamined, can hollow you out from the inside, an emotional parasite dressed as a virtue. Modern psychology terms one face of this dark empathy empathic distress. Unlike compassion, which energizes you to act, empathic distress collapses you into helplessness. You feel so much that you freeze, paralyzed by the magnitude of pain you cannot fix. Paul Bloom, author of Against Empathy, provocatively argues that empathy often leads to irrational, biased, even cruel outcomes, because we are wired to empathize selectively with those who look like us, who sound like us, who mirror our own fears. We make decisions that soothe our emotions, not decisions that serve justice or wisdom. Picture it. A single child on a television ad moves you to donate hundreds of dollars. Meanwhile, thousands suffering quietly elsewhere remain invisible to your heart. Your empathy, so fierce, so pure, becomes a spotlight blinding you to the wider field of suffering. As Nietzsche warned, whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. In this case, whoever feels for others must see to it that in the process they do not lose their way. Think of empathy like a river. It can nourish fields, sustain life, connect distant lands. But without banks, without boundaries, it floods, destroys, and washes away the very communities it was meant to sustain. Without discernment, empathy becomes emotional flooding, a relentless deluge in which your sense of self, your ability to act wisely, your very sanity can be swept away. Consider also the subtle tyranny of expectation. When you empathize too deeply, others may come to expect you to carry their pain for them. A slow, invisible transaction begins where your willingness to feel becomes an unspoken obligation to fix, to heal, to rescue. And when you inevitably fail because no one can save another from their inner world, you are left drenched in guilt, resentment, and despair. You were trying to be kind. Instead, you became a vessel for burdens not meant to be yours. Have you ever found yourself apologizing for your own needs because someone else's pain felt more important? Have you silenced your own struggles because you thought someone else had it worse? These too are the quiet costs of empathy untethered from wisdom. Empathy demands a profound question. Are you feeling with others, or are you losing yourself within them? To mistake the two is to invite chaos. To see the difference is to reclaim your soul. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it, the faint cracking of emotional armor, the subtle whispers of boundaries eroding, and it forces you to wonder, is it noble to drown in another's sorrow, or is it wiser and ultimately more loving to stay afloat so you can actually offer them a hand? The paradox is unavoidable. Empathy, at its deepest, is not about merging into others' suffering. It is about witnessing it without becoming it. It is about letting their sorrow touch you, inform you, but not consume you. In that sacred space between feeling and being overwhelmed lies the possibility of true compassion. Love without losing yourself, care without collapse. And so, the river winds on. The question lingers, will you be swept away by its force, or will you learn to shape its course? Imagine waking up one morning and realizing your life feels borrowed, that your emotions, your grief, your exhaustion, your constant ache aren't entirely your own. They are stitched together from the heartbreaks of people you've tried to help, the sorrows you thought you could shoulder. You've become a patchwork of everyone else's pain, and somewhere along the way the thread of your own soul grew thin. You didn't mean for it to happen. You were only trying to be good, to be there, to care. But every "are you okay?" became another invisible brick in the wall between who you are and who you think you must be for others. Every time you said, "I'm fine," while crumbling inside, you taught yourself that their pain matters more than yours. That to be worthy of love is to disappear. Human beings are exquisitely wired for emotional resonance. It's why a baby's cry triggers instinctive responses in adults. Why a single photograph of a refugee's journey can haunt you for days. Why, when someone you love weeps, you feel the weight in your own chest. Empathy is a fundamental part of our survival. But no one warned you what would happen if you opened the floodgates and forgot to build a bridge across the river instead. You see it in everyday moments. A mother who takes on the unspoken grief of her children until her own spirit becomes brittle. A therapist so devoted to her clients that she begins to dream their nightmares. A friend who, unable to bear a loved one's sadness, surrenders his own needs entirely, believing sacrifice is the highest form of loyalty. At first, it feels noble, even empowering. But slowly, a more insidious pattern unfolds. You become a mirror for other people's pain, but mirrors can crack. You lose sight of where you end and they begin. And when you can no longer distinguish their sorrow from your own, You become trapped in an endless echo chamber, feeling, absorbing, breaking. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once wrote, "The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all." Empathy, unchecked, can be this quiet thief. It doesn't announce itself with sirens or alarms. It simply asks for a little more of you each day until one day you wake up, and the face in the mirror looks tired, unfamiliar, almost translucent. And yet, paradoxically, it is this very experience of drowning that offers the first glimpse of real strength, because it forces the most painful and liberating question: what if your value doesn't come from how much pain you can carry for others? What if real empathy, the kind that saves instead of destroys, is not about sacrificing yourself, but about staying whole so you can truly serve? Think of the human heart. It pumps blood tirelessly to sustain life. But the heart nourishes itself first before sending lifeblood to the rest of the body. Self-care is not selfishness. It is biological wisdom. If the heart tried to give everything away without receiving, it would simply stop beating. So would you. Imagine now a different morning. You wake up and you feel the same pull, the same compassion, the same connection, but this time, there's a boundary, a sacred skin around your soul. You can hold another's hand without drowning in their storm. You can feel their sorrow, honor it without becoming it. You can say, "I see you, I care for you, and I will not abandon myself to prove it." Erich Fromm, in The Art of Loving, said, "Love is the active concern for the life and the growth of that which we love." True empathy, real love, must also include yourself. Otherwise, what you are offering isn't love, it's martyrdom dressed as virtue. And perhaps in that realization there is a strange kind of rebirth, not the rejection of feeling, but its evolution. A shift from drowning in others to standing with them. A shift from carrying every sorrow to lighting the way through it. Maybe, just maybe, the most courageous act of empathy isn't losing yourself. It's staying rooted in who you are so that you can truly, fiercely be present for others without vanishing into their pain. And so you step out of the river not untouched, not hardened, but whole. You stand there now on the banks of the river you once nearly drowned in. The water still calls to you, whispering stories of sorrow, injustice, heartbreak. You feel it all. You always will. But this time, you do not mistake the call to feel for the demand to lose yourself. This time you listen and remain standing. Empathy, as you've seen, is no simple virtue. It is not a soft light to be switched on and forgotten. It is a fierce, living force, one that must be cultivated, tempered, and directed. To simply feel is not enough. To simply care is not enough. The world doesn't need you broken and bleeding on the floor of your own heart. It needs you awake. It needs you clear-eyed. It needs you strong enough to bear witness without collapsing into the pain you see. Philosophers like Viktor Frankl taught that suffering, though inevitable, need not consume us. In the most brutal of human experiences, the concentration camps, he discovered that meaning could still be found. Not by merging with suffering, but by transcending it. Frankl didn't survive because he felt every sorrow around him. He survived because he chose how he would respond to it. In choosing, he preserved his humanity. You too are faced with a choice. Every day you are flooded with the emotions of others, stories of injustice, pleas for help, glimpses of heartbreak hidden in casual conversations. You can choose to drown. Or you can choose to be the one who remains rooted, who feels deeply but acts wisely. True empathy is not a surrender. It is an alchemy, a transformation of feeling into clarity. It is looking into the eyes of suffering and saying, "I see you. I will not abandon you, but I will not become you either. Because if I lose myself, I cannot help you find your way." Think of yourself as a lighthouse, not a ship lost in the same storm, not a rescuer who leaps into every crashing wave. A light anchored to the shore, steadfast, enduring, illuminating the way. Your strength does not lie in how much you can suffer for others. Your strength lies in how fiercely you can love without losing yourself. This is not detachment. This is not apathy. This is a deeper love, one that respects the boundaries between self and other. It is a recognition that you are not the solution to every sorrow. that you are not responsible for saving everyone, that you cannot heal others by destroying yourself. And so you begin to ask different questions, not how much pain can I absorb, but how can I love more wisely? Not how deeply can I suffer with you, but how deeply can I help you remember your own strength? There is an old Zen teaching: you cannot pour from an empty cup. It is simple, it is brutal, it is true. You are not infinite. Your emotional resources are sacred. Protect them not out of selfishness, but out of devotion to yourself and to the work of true compassion. So look again at the dark side of empathy, not as a condemnation, but as a guide. It shows you where the fires burn too hot, where the rivers overflow, where the bridges between souls collapse under the weight of too much feeling and too little wisdom. It is not telling you to stop caring. It is telling you to care better. Empathy is still the bridge, but now you know. Every bridge must be built with intention, with strength, with limits that honor the life on both sides. Otherwise the bridge crumbles, and all that's left is drowning. The question is no longer whether you will feel. You are human, you will. The question is, how will you feel? Will you let empathy consume you, distort you, bleed you dry, or will you forge it into something enduring, something that elevates rather than destroys? Perhaps in the end, empathy is not a soft surrender, but a courageous act of balance, standing at the threshold between self and other, carrying the light without letting it burn you to ash. And so the real question remains not how much you can feel for the world, but how deeply you can remain yourself while feeling it. Not who you save, but who you become.